All right. So good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me tonight because President Rivera is not with us this evening. So, but we do have a quorum, so we're going to go ahead and get started and jump into the agenda. The first item of which is the Pledge of Allegiance, which I will just lead.
Public for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
All right, thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and move on. And the next item is public participation. So Dr. Joyner and Dr. White.
Okay, to the commenters, please respect the 3-minute limit. And also, please do not engage in any language that would be insulting or harsh in your comments. Thank you very much. We can start. Our first speaker is Maria Harris Page.
Good day. Just wants to notify you guys again that I've asked for the parent link to go to the district about the Board of Education meetings. I'm concerned on why the district is not trying to engage more families in the Board of Education meeting. Because you have this lovely thing called Parent Link Blackboard that we pay for year after year and it's not used. Again, I've had a child that got home late, 4:38 from school, where her school is actually right up the street and less than 5 minutes away. And I'm not able to contact the school with any emergencies. There's usually not one to answer the phone or a great number to contact the public schools in case of an emergency, and we need to contact the school. Classroom Dojo is not something the district pays for or the taxpayer pays for. Classroom Dojo is another expense that the parents have to put out for if you want to actually engage on that platform. So again, please use our resources wisely and use the parent link as it should have been. I know about 15 years or so ago when I worked for the district, I was trained properly. And Dr. Jordan, I think you probably recall some of the emails that I sent you showing you how the staff need to be trained properly with Parent Link and Classroom Dojo. Also, my 10-year-old is still not in public school, and I am a resident of New Haven, and she is not receiving a free, appropriate public education from her residing town, as I stated, probably like 12 times or so. Also, I think that we need to look more towards the parent engagement and start answering actual emails and messages or concerns, because I think I'm the only one that comes up here every single month. And I haven't got a response from anyone, from the littlest person to the highest person. I'm sure you got decades of text messages and emails from me, but nothing has changed. I'm seeing the same people doing the same thing and no different results. My child needs to be educated. And I dare somebody to educate her. I dare somebody that has been
Time,
on this board. I'm the only person, right? Can I get an extra minute?
actually, you already have.
Because you have a long line
No,
of people and you have not been able to do one thing
Mrs.
about my child being educated.
Time, Mrs. I would hope that you would take that up with Superintendent.
I'm taking it up with the board members of the Board of Education of New Haven.
Time is up. You've actually.
Again, my
Mhm.
child has not been educated. And I wish somebody that is paid by our tax dollars try to educate my child. This is ridiculous. I shouldn't have to be cut off after several different emails, hundreds of emails I have to you, Dr. Joyner. You told me that this is too much,
That's not true. but-
too much. I have it verbatim.
Time, Mr. Chair,
Okay.
she's
You
passed.
guys have an awesome day.
Minute.
And I hope to see
30
my
seconds
child
past the
educated
time.
one day this school year. She has missed over 300 days of school since fourth grade to current. She's in sixth grade now. You have not educated her. I've had several different conversations, even Matt. I told you about her being bullied. Nothing has been done. Everybody in this room knows about it.
Right, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to
Have a
cut,
great day.
cut you off, but I would appreciate it if a school staff member would have a discussion with you right now this evening. I said I would hope a school staff member would have a conversation with you tonight, this evening. I'm gonna have to cut you off, but I am happy to have a conversation with you this evening. And I'm happy to have one with you this evening.
Mr. Chair, that concludes public comment.
All right, thank you. Next item is the approval, board minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of September 26th?
So moved.
Second,
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I just have one thing under the Head Start report, and all it is where it says at Mayo School, staff are working to reapply for the grant. It's the Head Start staff, which includes some folks at the Mayo School as well, but it's not just the Mayo School staff. That's my only correction. Hearing nothing else, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Mayor Elicker? Yes. Dr. Joyner?
yes,
Goldson?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, so that passes. Next item is, do I have a motion to approve the September 28th special meeting minutes?
So moved.
second,
Seconded, is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Mr. Goldson?
Yes.
Mayor Elicker? Dr. Joyner?
yes,
I'm a yes as well. So the next item is the superintendent's personnel report.
Good evening, board. I'm hereby asking for approval of the hires that are being recommended.
So moved.
second,
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing, seeing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Mayor Elicker? Mr. Goldson?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner?
yes,
I'm a yes as well. That motion passes. Okay, the next item is the Finance and Operations Committee items. Is there anything anybody would like moved separately?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would like for the item related to the solar panels to be, I can't remember which number that is.
Agreement number 1.
Yes, I'd like to have that moved separately.
All right, can do. I'm also going to have to separate out one because I'm going to need to recuse myself. And since we just have a bare quorum we're not going to be able to take up agreement number 3 with United Way of Greater Connecticut. The reason for that is as a conflict of interest, my wife will be doing some part-time work for them on a project with, working with adults, not children, not funded by New Haven schools at all, but I'm recusing myself on anything related to United Way. Yes, sir. Yes.
I agree with the mayor, as
Okay,
long as the majority of those voting. We have a quorum for a meeting. We don't
Right.
have a quorum for a vote.
Absolutely.
okay.
So I'll move item 3. Item 3.
If you choose to.
Second,
I can still facilitate. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. I recuse myself, Mayor Elicker. Yes. Dr. Joyner
yes.
and Mr. Goldson.
Yes.
So that motion passes. Next, I will move, I move that we approve agreement number 1, which is the non-financial agreement with Green Skies Clean Energy. I move we approve it. We moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Mr. Goldson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only concern with this, I haven't gotten an answer from it, was how are we going to guarantee that the rates are going to stay below our current vendor? I mean, the reason why we're doing this is, I mean, there's 2 reasons. One is to provide clean energy, but the second is also to provide a savings. And even though the savings is not huge over the 20 years, I think it was like 117,000 or something like that. I still like to make sure that this vendor doesn't jack up the prices during that 20-year contractual period. And I didn't get an answer as to how we guarantee that.
Okay, is there anybody that can speak on that item from administration?
Chief of Operations is actually meeting with the, another meeting tonight, so he's not available.
Okay,
I don't know if Dr. Finley, I don't know if you have any, background on it either.
okay. I don't recall that specifically being discussed in the, we had a good lengthy discussion on this item in the Finance and Operations Committee, but that specific concern of yours, Mr. Goldson, I don't recall was
Well,
talked about.
there were
So
2 concerns that I had. One was about maintenance. And they did respond to that and said that someone responded and said that the vendor would be responsible for the maintenance and repairs over the 20 years. So that's a good thing for us. But the second question was not responded to, which was how do we guarantee those lower rates? Is there going to be something in the contract that guarantees that will always be lower than whatever the current vendors are in terms of generation, cost for the generation? I don't know if that's in the contract or not. I mean, I won't be on the board then, but I don't want to see them coming back in 5 years and saying we have to jack the rates up for whatever reason. Is there a need to do this tonight? Is it time sensitive?
I do not know if it's time sensitive. I do know that it is connected to similar work that's happening on other city. Properties.
I'm not going to oppose, I'm not going to try to hold it up, but I'm going to vote against it because of my concerns. Okay. Thank you.
No work to find that answer.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Dr. Joyner.
Yeah, I think Mr. Goldson's raising some really legitimate questions. And the elephant in the room, and I'm sure this is a reputable company, is the whole notion of bait and switch. And maybe sometimes it's not deliberate, but I would think that a contract would have in it enough data to give us a sense that based on the increasing rate of electricity consumption and prices, that over these 20 years, that this investment will yield savings for the district. And I would hope that the Director of Operations clarified that. Unfortunately, he's not here, and we can't accept the superintendent to be an expert in everything. But I think this is a legitimate concern. And I trust, but I'd like to use Ronald Reagan's phrase. I need some verification myself that this won't come back to bite us after 10 years or 5 years or whatever. And there's a clause in the contract that at least will hold the company responsible for staying below the market rate of what electricity will be at that particular time, all things being equal relative to consumption. I think this is a really legitimate question, and the kind of question that boards should be asking in situations like this.
All right, thank you, sir. Mayor Elicker?
So I think typically in these contracts, the savings are realized and guaranteed or the financing is guaranteed based on the energy savings. But it understood that board members have that question and want that to be verified. Is it possible, Dr. Negron, that Tom might be available to answer a question via phone or via email that we could, because our board meetings tend to be quite long.
Yeah.
We could hold on this item and see if he can get back to us in an hour or two, or maybe 3, depending on how tonight goes.
I
hope-
We-
don't think it's gonna be 3 tonight.
We can
Please
try, I
don't-
believe he's sitting in another meeting, but we will definitely attempt that. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like the consensus is to table this item until later in the meeting, or perhaps a different meeting if we don't get some answers tonight, but I'm supportive of that, so.
I wouldn't define it as table, but more as Passover.
Passover?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that way we're not making an official motion on it.
Okay, and I withdraw the motion, so it's not happening at this time, so we'll go ahead and handle the other things, which is the 9, I move that we approve the 9 abstracts, the remaining 3 agreements, the 1 contract and the 2 purchase orders.
Second,
It's been seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goldston?
just around item 5, which is the agreement with Margulis Martinez with ESUMS to do the work at ESUMS. One of the questions that I asked was whether, apparently, I watched the finance committee meeting, and there was some talk of this person teaching. When I asked that question and how it relates to our union contracts, I was told actually it was identified, it wasn't really teaching. But I'm looking at the paperwork that came with it, and it did say that this person was going to be teaching 2 different types of courses. I don't know who they were teaching it to, whether it was teaching it to the teachers or to the students. So I just hope, I'm going to vote for this tonight, but I hope that the administration is clear with the union that this is not, okay.
If I may.
Dr.
So we did follow up on that, and Ms. Martinez will be primarily coaching, not necessarily teaching. There's a difference between teaching and coaching, because she's not assigned to any course. And also, she supports with the curriculum writing for that particular course, but she's actually not the teacher of record. That's how
Got it.
we would identify the person that teaches the course.
So the other question I would have is that coaching affecting any kind of union contracts we have? I mean, because I know that we have coaches, is it a different kind of coach?
Right, so I know that we have instructional coaches inside the building. Sometimes we bring coaching supports that we bring externally to be able to do that as well. So it should have no implication on contract, because of course we want to make sure that we're doing right by what's in the contract.
Thank you very much.
All right, is there any other discussion on these items? All right. Hearing and seeing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Mayor Elicker? Mr. Goldson?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner?
Yes,
And I'm a yes as well, so that motion passes. So, I'm sorry. Oh, Dr. Benitez has joined. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
I am, I apologize. I vote yes on this item, but I will not be able to remain the full meeting.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much. So the motion passes. Moving on to the next item is the students report. There are no students here or online. So we'll go to the teaching and learning report. Dr. Joyner.
yes, I'm gonna ask Dr. Benitez to chime in as well. We have really been trying hard to identify and have the board pass policy that we think will facilitate more effective teaching and learning in the schools. Dr. Benitez plays a dual role because she's chair of the governance committee as well as co-chair of teaching and learning. And we have presented to you guys the first reading. And I'm gonna let her, because that's her bailiwick, I'm gonna let her talk to you about that. I'd like to talk briefly though about firsthand experience I had today at Clemente Middle School, at K-8 school, with the entire faculty and support staff around trying to create a school-wide emphasis on students developing the ability to regulate their own behavior by being reflective and by being taught that there are several essential behaviors that are not only effective for doing well in the classroom, but for doing well in life. And it's the active model that I presented to the board last year. And so the principal asked me to come over and speak to the staff about it. And it was well received, and it's consistent with my understanding of what teachers are having to deal with in the classroom regarding student behavior. And the active model, which I'll talk more about in future meetings, allows for teachers, students, and parents to have the same instrument that they're looking at and come to some agreement about the student's ability to behave appropriately across a range of really essential behaviors. The first behavior is attendance. And so it gives the staff and the students and the parents an opportunity to focus on the same areas and to reinforce the positive behavior, coming to school, paying attention in class, cooperating with the teacher, being supportive of peers, and also the persistence that's necessary in order to do well in school and in life. And I was really impressed with the faculty and the administration at that school and the climate that they have established. It's really a welcoming and supportive climate. There are a lot of resources in the school. And I think the next two things is to try to help students and parents understand and get on the same page with students and parents around appropriate behaviors in the school environment and appropriate behaviors in the community. That's a real issue, not just among children. But we all came to the conclusion that the problems that we see ourselves confronting in the community and in the world at large is because there are so many people with power and authority that are misbehaving. And at extreme levels, we end up with wars. But writ small, we end up in school situations and classroom situations that are chaotic. And we do need order and peace. And those are some really dedicated teachers. I happen to know some of them personally. Some of them were New Haven High School graduates. And I look forward to doing more of that work. Unfortunately, Mrs. Duff is going to be leaving December 1st, but she's trying to finish strong. She is finishing strong, and she wants to ride out her term by doing everything she has to do to try to set the school up for the next person. So I want to give a shout out to those teachers and administrators and faculty at Roberto Clemente. That's one of my favorite schools. I was able to bring Mrs. Clemente here back in the 80s. Or was it the early 90s? So Mr. Alberino was principal. And those teachers over there are working hard. The kids are working hard, and it's a great place. I would want my children to go to a school like that. So I appreciate that. That's all I have to report. I'm going to ask Dr. Benitez to chime in wherever she thinks there's something that I missed, because she's been chairing the committee for the last couple of meetings because of my personal challenges.
So the staff and the discussions have been around the priorities that the superintendent has established for the year. But one of the things that we have been able to do, which I think is a positive step, is that the staff who are in the discussion find the ways in which they can support those priorities. And with the support of Ms. Keisha Hannans and Dr. Negron, they have been developing presentations as we discuss some of the priorities, and they discuss how they are implementing to impact those. And you've seen some of those, and hopefully we will continue to see them. I know we will continue to see them. So I encourage everybody to stay tuned, because this teaching and learning committee is hot and is working hard to make sure that not only we do things in schools, but that we discuss what we're doing in schools and listen to the input of each of the members of the committee.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I have one more thing to say. After the literacy presentation last week, a number of people, educators and parents, called me and said, what about math and science? And my official explanation to them was that we have to teach kids how to read in order to teach them to read to learn. So I think going forward, we're going to have to probably do more presentations on reading and the content areas, so that people understand that given the readiness that children bring to the district, we have to invest a lot of time in reading, but it does not mean that we're not reading in the content areas in those social studies, math, science, and unified arts classes. But I think we have to message that better, because some people are under the mistaken assumption that we're going to spend 90 minutes in reading and that's going to take away from other areas. Dr. Negron has a doctorate in this area, so do I. And we're going to have balance in the curriculum, Dr. Benitez as well. But I think we have to message that better. So I'm going to want to try to put that on the agenda at the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, so that we can do a presentation to help people understand that we do have a broad view of that. But language does unlock every content area door. And teachers of particular content areas also are teachers of reading in that content area. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Dr. Benitez?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that math is coming, and thank you, Dr. Joyner, for lifting that, because it is our next meeting would have math as an emphasis, and I am sure, as we have done with other things, we will bring a report for not only the board, but for the public on this priority area, which is very important for our superintendent, and she is making an emphasis on that, same as she's making emphasis on reading and on attendance. We need kids in school in order to teach them to read, in order to teach them math.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions related to this? All right. So I see Mr. Lamb has joined the Zoom session, so I'm hoping we can go back and pick up the item, which was agreement number 1, the non-financial agreement with Green Skies Clean Energy. So, guess the proper way to me to do this would be I move that we approve the agreement with the non-financial agreement with Green Skies Clean Energy.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or questions?
Um, as I said earlier, question that I raised that was not answered over the weekend was how do we guarantee that those rates will remain competitive throughout the 20-year agreement?
It is my understanding through Mr. Winter and the members of the committee that put together the documents related to this, that the rates are locked in for the duration of the contract as per the supporting documents. Predicting whether or not they will be competitive, the rates are significantly less than what our current rates are. We have no way to know what the rate structure is going to be 10 years from now, 15 years from now. There's always a opportunity for us to look at them again, just as there has been with our existing contracts. The contract that was put together for this rate structure is very similar to the 19 other school districts that we have, schools that we have that have this type of agreement in place already. So it would be my intention that if the rates do change to a point where it's no longer beneficial for the district, that the either the contract is dissolved or we are able to renegotiate those rates with our provider.
And that's contractually, that's listed in the contract, our ability to be able to do that. Is that correct?
Once it's approved and we go through the negotiation process of the contract, that will be my intention to include within the contract language. Because I experienced this before where we have done a contract for this type of service and the rates that we were provided no longer became beneficial. So you have to have some kind of a measure within that contract to be able to say that you can either renegotiate or resolve the contract.
I have one other side question, Mr. Chair. Since this is a multi-year contract, will this have to go before the Board of Alders for approval?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is a part of a much larger package that's being put together by the city. I separated these two items out only because it needed to go before this body to be approved by the Board of Education before it went to the Board of Aldermen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Looks like Dr. Benitez. Or was your hand up from previous? All right. Anybody else have anything on this item? All right, hearing nothing, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Mayor Elicker, Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez.
Yes.
Right, so that motion passes and we will move on to the Facilities Naming Committee report.
Okay, I had a really great meeting with Eric Schultz, who is one of our highly esteemed tech specialists. And he has the capability to create a space on our webpage where people can, one, read the bio sketch of the person that's been nominated, and two, they can vote. And so what we discussed was a window that would open and shut in terms of what's a reasonable time frame for people to get the votes in, and a way in which we could assure that the people voting are eligible voters. And that would mean that we would have to decide that an eligible voter is a resident of New Haven, But we also might have to expand that because some of the people that, for instance, would vote for someone to be memorialized or to have something named for a living person might be teachers that live in other communities. So we would have to agree on a standard for voter eligibility. We don't want to be voter suppressors, but I'd like to hear from the board at some point on who should be eligible voters. Two specific examples: the people that are up now, Dr. Garris and Mrs. Pappas. So Mrs. Pappas did a lot of her work at Clemente, but she also did a lot of her work throughout the city through the parent Title I, along with Florence Caldwell. And so we need to have a reasonably logical way of determining who should be able to vote. And that's the only thing we need at this point, because once we can establish that, then he can set up some type of verification system that would let us know that we don't have people that are stuffing the ballot box or it's not funny, but some of the stuff that's going on nationally in the past and now regarding discussions about bogus votes and that sort of thing. And that's the biggest barrier, but he is very competent. Actually, he's a physicist and a computer science specialist. So he's a brilliant young man and very eager to get this done. Once we can nail that down, we'll ask him to come to the board and present the protocol to the board. So that's the holdup.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions? Mr. Goldston?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding of what you're trying to do is not so much a vote, but is more of like a poll or a survey of the community.
It would be a petition. Like, for instance, if I wanted to name the library at Hill House after Darnell Golson,
Okay.
it would be a you spent a lot of time there, so it would be a petition. But we want to know that the people that are voting knew Darnell Golson. They agreed that his bio sketch is laudable and that he certainly is deserving. And we want to make sure that those are the people that would be eligible to vote, rather than, people who have no knowledge of you, who don't live in the city, who are not connected in any way to New Haven Public Schools. And we can't just limit it to New Haven residents, because there are too many people that would have known that, maybe taught at the school but lived in a different community, maybe did other things in the community but lived in a different community. So that's the challenge.
That's a big challenge.
I know.
Dr. Joyner. I don't know how you beat that challenge, but I look forward to seeing how you do.
We'll try.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions on this item? I guess the only thing that I would say is, I guess my question would be, would this poll be in addition to whatever the current policy has to inform the process? Because if I remember correctly, it also has some requirements for some school personnel of particular job types, like, I don't know, principal, parent, et cetera. Would this be in addition to that process?
Well, what happens is that that process would be, I sent them the policy. And I actually, and by the way, I need to give a shout out to Gilda Herrera, because she's in charge of all of IT, and she's been very helpful with that. I sent them the policy. So we're trying to develop a voting protocol that is consistent with the policy itself. And so that once the decision has been made, we can ascertain that all of the people that the policy says should be a part of it, the principal, representatives from different stakeholder groups in the school. And in the case of say naming a school, we like to have community consent. In the case of naming a part of a building within a school, we'd like to have at least the current staff and people who have previously worked in the building. We'd like to hear from them. And that way we can avoid, I believe, the mistakes that actually have been made in naming national things. So that's the concern. And maybe one of the things you always say to me, Matt, is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And that sometimes we have to do the best we can and then make revisions if we find that we've made errors. So I'm anxious to hear from anybody that could help move this along, because I think that we do need to give credit where credit is due, particularly to people who move above and beyond the call of duty to serve the city and the education needs of the city.
All
And I'm
right, thank
anxious
you.
to hear from anybody that could help us with this.
All right, hearing, seeing nothing else on this item. Thank you very much. We'll go on to the next one, which is the superintendent's report. Dr. Negron.
Thank you so much. Tonight, I want to take this opportunity to bring forth two presentations. One, which I will be asking Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Ms. Keisha Hannons, to support with, is to share with you where we are as it relates to the federal funds in ARP ESSER and the intention for the remaining funds out of that grant. And following that report, I am glad to see so many of our staff here tonight that are going to be joining our Executive Director of Student Services, Ms. Tiffany Jackson, and also our Chief of Youth, Family, and Community Engagement, Gemma Joseph Lumpkin, to share with you a little bit about where was that we landed last year as it relates to social emotional learning, and to give you insight into what it is that we're doing moving forward in 23-24. This is something that becomes key to the work that we are attempting to do in re-engaging our students. We already offered you a presentation related to student attendance and chronic absenteeism, and that is why today it is pertinent that we begin to talk about social emotional learning. So let's start first by having Ms. Keisha Hannons walk us through the ARP ESSER.
Madam President, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Gold.
Thank you. While she's on her way up, is this the same presentation that you gave to the Board of Alders about a week or two ago?
It is very similar.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present our ARP ESSER, our ESSER spending overview. Go to the next slide. If you can recall, it seems like so long ago, but it was just like yesterday. We received the CARES grant, which is ESSER 1. We received approximately 8.5 million. And you can see a breakdown of spending for ARP ESSER. I'll draw your attention to about 50%. If you look on the far right, the third from the bottom was spent on computers. Obviously, we were trying to become 1-to-1, and we actually achieved 2-to-1 eventually over time with this funding as well. It's important to note that on this funding, it was open-ended as far as the priorities, and that ESSER funds could be utilized for expenditures occurred between March 13th, the date that the national emergency was declared by the President of the United States. ESSER 2. ESSER 2 was awarded January 5th, 2021. It was approximately 37.7 million. There were 4 priority areas for ESSER 2, academic supports, learning loss, learning acceleration, school safety, social emotional well-being, family and community connections, as well as remote learning, staff development, and the digital divide as well. And the percentages are listed. You can see we spent about a third of the grant on full-time employees. This was our investment in ensuring that we reduce class size. So our teachers that we added in grades 1 to 3 to reduce class size, our ESSER teachers, you'll find they were on ESSER 2. ESSER 2 has met its sunset date of September 30th, so those funds are no longer available. ARP ESSER. ARP ESSER was awarded January 17th, 2022 in the amount of approximately 80 million. If you can recall, we engaged over 5,500 stakeholders in the process for determining how do we want to leverage these funds. I'm not sure why the slide is doing something wacky right now, but there were 5 main priority areas: learning acceleration, family and community engagement, building safe and healthy schools, technology, as well as social emotional learning. To date, we've expended approximately $37 million, and we have about 43 million remaining. So I just want to bring you through the plan for spending moving forward. You see the line items and as well as the amounts in each particular line item. I want to break out a few of the line items to kind of give you a little bit more details behind the numbers. So this is where the presentation differs from the presentation to the Board of Alders. You can go to the next slide. So breakdown of priorities and professional development. Literacy, science, math, professional development is occurring. As you know, we implemented new curriculum. We purchased the textbooks, of course, with the ESSER funding as well. Learning academies. We offer learning academies for our teachers after school. Each department on the academic team offers after school PD and support. Some of that support is led by our supervisors, but some of it is also led by our teachers. And so we stipend them in order to lead PD for their peers in the particular areas in job embedded coaching. That is case in point, we have a coach from HMH into reading going through all of our schools. We talked about it last board meeting and observing instruction and providing PD as well. You see, we're still purchasing supplies and textbooks. We'll still need those items in all of the core curriculum areas. Restorative staff, our care coordinators and our restorative coaches still are on our ESSER. We carried them over an additional year because we had the additional year of funding. Initially, we were only carrying them for 2 years, but we're carrying them for 3 years, as well as bilingual teachers, social workers, psychologists, and counselors. Facilities, in the area of facilities and HVAC, plan at this time, we have Beecher, Martinez, Troop, Hillhouse, and Cross for a new HVAC system, the roof replacement at Hillhouse, as well as door repairs. We're still purchasing computer equipment because we still need it. As we know, and it's been known nationally, many of these items are sunsetting. And so in order to keep technology in their hands, we have to replenish these items as well. And so that gives you a little breakdown, overview of our funding and our plan moving forward as these funds need to be expended by September 30th, 2024. Thank you.
All right. We'll go ahead and take questions now. First is Mr. Golson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 2 questions. First question I had was really part of our finance report around the gym, the replacement of the track at the field house. And this is kind of related to our funding and how we spend our money. Apparently we can't use capital funds, local capital funds to repair that, to replace that floor, repair it or whatever. And I'm wondering why we don't develop, and according to the reports I read, the repairs are about $100,000, but we bring in about between $200,000 and $300,000 in revenues in the field house. And I'm wondering why we don't have a dedicated fund to take care of these these repairs that are not covered by capital funds. That's the first question. I don't know if it can be answered tonight, but I'm hoping that the administration will eventually come back to us and say that we're putting together some sort of like a savings plan so that we're not rushing and trying to raise money at the last minute to make those repairs before the season starts. But in terms of this ESSER report, what do we do when this money runs out? I mean, what's the plan? Yeah.
Mhm.
It's an excellent question, and that is why I'm leveraging the needs assessment that I'm conducting as part of the entry. Because we need to make sure that whatever decisions we're making and what we are investing in is all aligned to whatever our strategic plan is going to be. We have to ensure that we laid out the priorities and that all the investments align to that so that we have a plan moving forward on how we're going to sustain what we are doing. I've been speaking to the staff to say we have to take a close look at everything that we do now. Also take a look at what has been the impact to see what the return on investment has been so we can make those crucial decisions. Because it is very clear to me, even though I am not done, we're not going to be able to continue to do the things that we've done and to the scope that we've done them. Because when we look at our budget, we look at our operational budget, it is very clear that the majority of that budget is going into staffing with very, very little being allocated to programming because most of the programming has been coming out of grants. And the reality is that grants they're drying out. So we have to make sure, again, that we're very cognizant of what exactly is going to be our plan, what is going to be our programming, and to make sure that whatever decisions we're making, that they're being equitable, because we have to ensure that we service all 19,000 plus students, not just a few, not just some neighborhoods and not others. So this is like a little preamble to let folks know hard decisions are going to come because we're not going to continue to do what we've done for many, many years. Because there's this culture that people just make an assumption, well, we've always done it. So we put in the requests. So I'm here to say, don't assume that moving forward, just because it's been done, that we will do that. Because we're going to have to look at every single investment moving forward.
My biggest concern is our investment in teachers. And when I saw the report and how much we're spending in ESSER money, especially ESSER 2 money, in teachers that's disappearing, and we already lack, the number of teachers that we need. I mean, we just got an email from a parent last week about how their student hasn't had a teacher for 3 years in a row. In whatever school it was, I can't remember what the specifics were, but that's an investment that we can't afford to skimp on, right? We can't say, well, we can't do what we've been doing because without teachers, we don't have a school system, right? So I just like to see some long-term plan on how we deal with that eventually.
If I may, so I completely agree with you that teaching and learning has got to be at the center of everything that we do because that is where it starts. I believe Assistant Superintendent Red Hannons mentioned that a lot of the investment that went into our ESSER was to reduce size as it pertained to grades 1, 2, and 3. So this has been a luxury that we have had during ESSER times. But we're going to have to go back again and reassess, look at our contract language. There might be some, I'm not sure what is the right word that I'm looking for right now. My head is thinking in my first language right now. So the word in English is not coming to me at the moment. But to say again that there may be some of those things that we were able to do because we had the ESSER money that now we will not be able to do. But I also want to reiterate, I am not saying all of a sudden, because I know there's a newspaper here, I don't want to make sure that that's not interpreted to mean Negron is talking about cutting teachers. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is teaching and learning will come first. We have to be intentional about what is it that we do, what are the number of teachers that we have, what is the enrollment in schools, what are we offering, basically right-sizing, and again, always looking through an equity filter. But I want to reiterate, teaching and learning has got to come first.
And Dr. Negron, if I could just add on the teachers that we hired to reduce class sizes in grades 1 to 3, many of those teachers have become permanent teachers in the district. They were able to earn their teaching certification. And so we have them as permanent teachers in our school system, in our budget now.
Yeah, but we never have enough money to pay for our permanent teachers. And that's without the ones that, without the unfilled positions. So again, you know, it's a dilemma we're going to have to face. And no disrespect to you, Superintendent, when you say luxury, you didn't mean luxury because, right? I mean, for other school systems, having small class sizes is not a luxury, it's a given. For us, because of the issues we have to deal with in this system and the size of our system and the lack of commitment from some other sources to fund those needs. I mean, you know, it was just 3 or 4 years ago when we were looking at 15 million, $30 million deficits. And they didn't just disappear because we were good. They were disappearing because the city was always covering us at the end of the day. But I mean, I don't know how much of that they're going to be able to continue to do. And I believe that once these grant monies go on, we saw at the last finance report how much, I mean, the grants were like reduced by many millions of dollars from last year to this year. And we're just going to have to start sounding the alarm sooner. And maybe there are other things that we could do, like maybe closing 1 or 2 more buildings. I don't know if that's an option at this point, but we should certainly have everything on the table and be able to review all that stuff.
If I may add.
Okay.
You are correct in if the ECS grant was fully funded, which is not, we would definitely have what we would need to not have to always be taking corners.
Mhm.
So you're absolutely right about that. But when I talk about luxuries, is that often we are trying to answer all types of personal requests and agendas that come forth. And what I'm saying is, without a plan, a strategic plan that names our priorities and how we are going to look at things through an equity lens, we're never going to be able to vet decisions through that filter to say, yes, we're going to ensure that every dollar that we have, we're going to stretch it. And we're going to make sure that we have a plan that coheres everything so that we're doing right by all kids and not just by taking away because somebody wants to do this project. So now we have to find money to do that project. What I'm saying is, let's have a plan that puts teaching and learning at the center, that puts all of the students at the center, that puts our teachers at the center so that they get the supports that they need to be able to carry out the curriculum and the programming that we want to bring forward to all of our students.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to point out one thing. This is the 3rd meeting in a row where the administration said I was right about something. So I want to make sure that's on the record.
Let the record show. Okay, Dr. Joyner.
Well, first of all, we've been saying this since we've been on the board,
Mhm.
that the state law says that we're supposed to serve the education interests of the state. On the other hand, the state does not always provide adequate resources to serve that education interests. And Dr. Negron's comment and Mr. Golson's comment over the last 8 years about that is spot on, because the fiscal context that New Haven finds itself in is that we are really subsidizing a lot of services that people don't have in the surrounding towns. And we're subsidizing them because we have so many tax exempt institutions, which means that the citizens of New Haven have to pay more proportionately for hospitals and schools and what have you. And that's a real problem. It's a structural problem. The other part is the federal government. The federal government is not the agency that is legally responsible for public schools in states, but yet they want to tell public schools, even President Obama and President Bush, they all wanted to tell us what we should do. And the money is tied to whether we do what they want us to do. So you have the tail wagging the dog. The other part is that the state has imposed certain positions on school districts that they expect us to pay for. And it is, again, a case of unfunded mandates. What I appreciate that the superintendent is doing is say, listen, we need to identify what is not negotiable in terms of teaching and learning. That's personnel, resources, supplies, and so on and so forth. Anything beyond that, if we can't afford it, we can't have it. Schools are not designed to have after-school programs of the magnitude that we have, so that parents don't have to rush home from work. In fact, in some places, you have to pay for that. And there are a lot of other things that we provide our communities that have not traditionally been under schools. So the point about programs and this group wants that and so on and so forth, everything has a price tag. And then they get on the mayor's case because they're asking him, we want more police officers, we want better pay for teachers and so on and so forth. It has a price tag. So that means that if you want it, you have to be willing to pay for it. And in our cases, it's the taxes that we pay. And we really do have to help the governor as well as the president of the United States understand that if you want the kind of education system that you're always talking about, then it costs money to have that. And if you're in a district where you have children with a lot of unearned disadvantages, that's like the emergency room. It is a lot more expensive to operate the emergency room than it is general care. And in some cases, with the number of refugees that we have in the city, with the number of kids that come from a heritage of poverty and deprivation, we have to work harder. We had that discussion briefly at Clemente today. And we have to message it in such a way that people understand that if you want this, you have to do this. You can't sit back and expect that the superintendent, the board, and teachers will come up with all the solutions and that everything has a price tag. So, Dr. Negron, I thank you so much for starting this conversation. Mr. Golson, I thank you for hanging on it. And Mayor Elica and Matt, you guys are just phenomenal in terms of trying to make sure that we do get what we pay for, but we also have to pay for what we want going forward. And it's a hard conversation, but it's the truth. I'm done, Mr. President.
All right. Thank you very much. Just real quick, I want to say thank you for the presentation. I found it interesting. I liked we had some of this presentation at Finance and Operations, and also I know as part of the Alders Education Committee meeting. So do appreciate that. The one thing that I want to just echo here is that making the case to the state for increased funding for these programs will be key. There was a lot of people here in the district, members of the unions, members of the staff, members of the board, members of the city, alders, et cetera, making the case for the increased funding from the state. We do have extra funding this year because of that work and more funding on deck for next year. But then the case still needs to be made for equitable funding for the schools based on the needs. And I think it's very instructive if you do something like take a look at the recent U.S. News World Report rankings of high schools in the United States. The number 2 school in Connecticut, I believe, is Staples High School, which is a large comprehensive high school. I want to say it's in Greenwich. They're a similar size to Cross, and they have 50 more staff members in that school. And it makes me wonder what the staff at Cross could do if you had 50 colleagues with you to handle some of those issues. And when you look at the information on the state report cards at the Department of Education. They do not have the same number of multi-language learners. They do not have the same number of special education children. They do not have the same number, et cetera, on down the road. And they spend thousands of dollars more per year on each student in that district than we're able to here. And, you know, so we're trying to, I appreciate the administration maximizing as best as can with all these funds. And there's a lot of work to be done. Finally, I want to say just one thing related to the Hill House, the field house. If I remember correctly, this was discussed. We did pass a contract tonight to do some repairs on the track. The full replacement is needed, and my understanding is that we don't have the capital funds identified to fit in this more than $1 million project, and they're trying to find it. They're going to try to also leverage some state funds because it's so heavily used in this region, and the monies that we earn from rental and fees funds, Mr. Prochaska, Eric Chosky, talked about that, how it funds parts of the athletic department. So that's where those funds are going. Happy in future Finance and Operations Committee meetings to have more detailed information on that or continue on the process. So, anybody else? Mr. Goldson.
In regards to that, part of the problem is deferred maintenance. You know, they don't do regular maintenance, probably because of the money, I'm not sure. But the longer you let a problem go, the worse it gets and the more it costs at the end of the day. So I hope that we start developing plans to deal with those issues sooner rather than later.
All right, thank you. And there was testimony at the Finance and Operations Committee meeting on the definite deferred maintenance, and a lot of it's based on not enough capital funds
Right.
to meet the needs, the requirements. So, my understanding. Anything else on this item? Thank you very much. Dr. Negron?
Okay. Well, thank you for that thorough discussion. I now would like to hone in a little bit on social emotional learning. And for that, as I mentioned earlier, I have Executive Director Tiffany Jackson and also Chief of Youth, Family and Engagement, Gemma Joseph Lumpkin, along with their teams, who are going to give us an overview of where we landed at the end of the 22-23 academic year, so that we can share with you where we're heading in 23-24.
Good afternoon again, Dr. Negron, board members. Thank you for this opportunity for us to present some of the work that we've been doing over the past 3 years. Tonight, we're going to take a deep dive into the data that tells the story a bit of where we've been going, the progress we've made, and the areas that still need improvement. We're going to show the coherence in getting this work done. We're going to give some examples of what this work looks like in the school. We're going to discuss next steps, and we're going to explain the process as best as we can around the implementation of social emotional learning.
Point of order.
Goldson?
Is there in this presentation at the beginning a definition of what social emotional learning is? I'm a little confused.
No problem. So I just wanted to just formally introduce everyone who's here. So again, we have Monica Abbott, who is the social emotional learning coordinator, Bill Scott, who is a district coach for SEL, Nikisha Kador, who is a restorative practices coach. And then we have Lauren Sepulveda, who is an AP at John Martinez. Oh, and then Mr. Nguyen, who's the star of our presentation. So Mr. Nguyen, if you don't mind, Mr. Nguyen is up. And the only thing that we're going to ask is because we are going to do the discipline data and then go into social emotional learning and then ask all the questions.
Good evening. I'm here to lay for those who don't know me, my name is John Nguyen. I'm Supervisor of Research Assessment Evaluation, and I'm here to lay down the historical backdrop of where the SEL has done and for what the work that Ms. Jackson as well as Ms. Lumpkin or Joseph Lumpkin teams have done. So I have the great privilege of collaborating with them in this case. So my data presentation is broken down to 3 parts. One is the historical New Haven disciplinary history, as well as following that we'll have where it compares with the rest of the big cities in Connecticut. And then finally, where we stand as of the first month of the school year. So with this first data, it's you can't see the bottom line. I don't know if you can move it up a bit more, but I can just read it to you then. In that case. Oh, no, it's still, yeah, you see that? Yeah. So the far left line is the green is 2019, 2020. And you can see that was before the pandemic. And then there's a year break and we have the 2 school years following that. And for those 2 school years, you can see the gradual increase in suspensions for in school as well as out of school following the pandemic. So you see the increase from there, and a lot has to do with the lack of social interactions with other colleagues or students. And when they come back to school, we've had many issues coming back. This next part then deals with, well, how do we look with the other cities? And if you compare New Haven with the rest of the state, you can see that New Haven has the lowest amount of suspensions and sanctions throughout the bigger cities in Connecticut. And this general trend has been that the suspensions were a little bit higher before the pandemic. It went down and then it came back up. The state just published the 22-23 for the rest of the cities. And I saw some of the increases there. The state went up by 900 from 2021 to 2022 to the 22 to 23 school year. Bridgeport went up 100. Hartford went up 800. Waterbury went up 900, and we went up 600. That's including the current year that they just published for 22 and 23. But if you look at that, I mean, it's the general trend that you saw on the previous slide with New Haven, where the suspensions have slowly, gradually increased since the pandemic. All right. Now this next slide is for the first month of school. So up until September 30th. And it's comparing the first month of school versus the previous school years. So you have from after the pandemic from 21, 22, and 23. You see again, it increases last year. And then for this school year, it went down for this first month. So both teams will talk about what they've done to sort of improve our statistics from the previous school years. And you can see that with the pandemic, it was higher and then it went down and it went up last year and it's going down for this first month. Then we broke down the first month of data for this school year to last year. And by grade level, you can see the top one is kindergarten through 6th grade. Then you have 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th and 12th grade. And you see the biggest years as 9th grade and 10th grade. And you see, but for the most part, everything has gone down, which is similar to the previous slide with the first month. So there has been a decrease for this school year to last school year. And then finally, we are comparing the incident types from this year for the first month to last year. So for fighting and physical altercations, you can see that there has been a decrease. The only increase for the most part has been with drug, alcohol, and tobacco. And you can see that's pretty much the prevalence of the availability of that throughout our city. And then you can see for the most part, all the other ones are decreased except for the bottom ones, which is disorderly conduct and leaving school grounds. So this is sort of the backdrop of what these the SEL teams have done. So
Good evening.
First and foremost, thank you Superintendent Negron and the board for creating this time and space for us to share a little bit of our social emotional learning story this evening. I think it's important to open this conversation by acknowledging and underscoring the fact that this is not new work that we're embarking upon here. New Haven has always been a Comer district and for years had a very robust social development department. Rather, what we are striving to do is to preserve and build upon the success and groundwork that has been laid as we continue to center around the whole child that's referenced in our strategic. Academic success is always at the forefront for our students, but I think we could all acknowledge that we can't teach our kids if we can't reach our kids. And this is where SEL becomes critical. Using the collaborative for academic and social emotional learning as another foundational block, we strive to provide our students simultaneously with prevention and intervention as we build capacity within our buildings and foster safe and supportive learning environments. In New Haven, we utilize a three-pronged approach to SEL. We could talk about the importance that explicit instruction of social skills has on our students. We could also discuss the academic integration and how that lives throughout our school day. However, our work is most deeply rooted in the relationships that we form and the culture and climate that we foster within our buildings. And what does this look like? These are our teachers waiting at the door to greet students with any number of hugs and high fives. This is a principal waiting for students to get off the bus wearing a tutu just to garner smiles. Or, you know that school, right? Or an assistant principal getting pied in the face. This is that teacher that has calming music, mood lighting, and a diffuser going as students set about their independent task. Last but not least, it's any number of adults within a school building squatting down way too low to sit next to a young child to work through big feelings, even though we know our knees are going to be screaming on the way back up. To Mr. Golson's question, SEL is all of these proactive and preventative measures, as well as a series of interventions under a multi-tiered system of support. When we talk about our work, we typically frame around these four buckets, starting with the utilization of data to inform decisions. We look first and foremost at yearly data in the form of culture and climate surveys, but recognizing that we need multiple data points, naturally we're looking at things like the number of circles facilitated, the types of circles, and certainly discipline data. Secondly, we recognize the importance of being in buildings and rolling up our sleeves alongside educators. Therefore, direct service is always a huge component. Lastly, we're striving to build capacity through professional learning and recognizing that we have 41 schools with drastically different needs. Obviously, this looks a little bit different across those buildings. At this point, Nikisha will spell out those four prongs a little bit.
Afternoon, everyone. Or evening, sorry about that. Thank you all for the time to be here. I just want to take a little while just to share a little bit about our universal approach to restorative practices. I want to open up by saying, so we know that the code of conduct has been reshaped so that we're able to view it through a restorative lens. And so a part of our work is that 80% of our work is preventative, right? Sometimes it's easy for this work to be viewed as something that is like the solution, but a lot of our work is centered around building communities. And so what those communities look like that we build is really getting into the classroom and connecting with our students. And so that looks like community building classrooms where we'll go into classrooms and we will have grade level restorative circles where students are able to connect, and also where we support our teachers to do the work. And so when the teachers view us and they have us in there doing the work beside them, it actually helps them to feel more comfortable with the work that they do. And so that's a little bit about what we do with the community building circles. Since starting this work, we've been able to impact over 750 students with Circle Blast. And we've also been able to facilitate over 200 restorative circles dealing with harm on a more minute level. And in terms of students who experience more extreme social emotional cases, we're able to offer what we call restorative conferences. And those restorative conferences are more one-on-one where we connect with our students to help them to understand the impact that they've had, but most importantly, to build a skill set. And so a quick story with some of the students that we work with. We recently had a freshman who came in, and we knew her from restorative work that we did during the summer because this is an ongoing thing that we've done. But we were able to connect with this student and really talk about the impact that she had, but also to dig deep and really understand the needs that she had, and be able to connect her with resources and help her to be able to transition back in the classroom and be successful, not just for the day, but ongoing. And so that's a little bit about what we do as far as restorative practices. And I'm going to hand the mic over to Monica.
Thank you, Nikisha, and everyone. So all the things that both Bill and Nikisha have spoke about really begin through the multi-tiered system of support framework that New Haven Public Schools utilizes. And all of the work, the universal work they speak about, really lives in the development of the culture and climate through a whole school approach, meaning that we work together to meet the needs both academically and socially, emotionally for our students. It also means that when we're looking at the climate of culture, we're not only thinking about the social emotional needs of our students, but we're also thinking about the staff. We're thinking about the staff beyond self-care to think about the things that Bill and Nikisha both shared. How do we provide direct services to really support the educators in the building, teachers, principals, et cetera, to know that we are all in this together. And through the Comer no-fault problem-solving approach, we collectively have those conversations together, saying we know these challenges exist, and we know that we have to find new ways that are more aligned to our code of conduct that we've reshaped over the last few years. Those are non-punitive approaches that really look at the needs of the students that we're around. We need to understand that they have social emotional needs and that they are learning to manage those needs. But back to the educators, we need to show that we're supporting them. And the ways we do that is providing them information to support them in things that they're facing, challenges that they face within the classroom. And one of those areas is through the mental health challenges we know are happening nationally. So we have started to provide cohorts of trainings called mental health first aid trainings, which are intended to give teachers, educators, adults in our district information that can be utilized for their own selves, but also for the students. How do you help yourself through a mental health crisis or a mental health challenge, which we all face? And then to look at, we have students in front of us that are in crisis, and how do we know who to ask for help if they're in crisis or if they're facing a challenge? What can we do to support them? And collaboratively, we've found that with the ESSER funds, some of the resources we're bringing in, we're utilizing that to actually support our students in meeting their own social emotional needs. So if a student comes in knowing that they're upset for something that happened at the bus, they're not accessing their academic learning because they're dysregulated. They need help understanding, one, that they've gone from this feeling of I'm happy I'm going to school to something that elevates them to frustrated. That means they have to understand first the emotion, the self-awareness piece, and then learn to manage and cope with that. And that's where we bring in the spaces and utilizing the furniture, adaptive furniture, and calming tools that we've been bringing to schools to create spaces where students can use them in a proactive, universal way. The next thing is looking at a tool called Review 360 that is intended to look at the interventions we're using, including the restorative practices, to say, how are they impacting? How much time are they spending out? Are our universal approaches working? And for our interventions in a classroom, a teacher might be doing 27 different things to support the needs of students. How are we collecting data? We're going to use this Review 360 tool to really look at the ones that we know are impacting and changing the behaviors and supporting our students, and then replicate them across other schools and other places. So just to show you a little bit about this, we've had 9 schools when we started utilizing Review 360 a few years ago, and now today we're up to 27, which again goes back to the point of working on collaborating with the new code of conduct and using this as another tool to look at interventions, universal practices, and preventative approaches. One last thing from this data that we pull in, we're also seeing that sometimes it's about direct service and we need to bring in more support in that sense. We look at it through the team approach. So it's not one person supporting the student, it's a whole team. And we brought in a couple key people to work with us on that. One is care coordinators who work directly with the school-based team, the families, and the community partners to make sure that all the interventions they're all working on really align to truly meet the needs of the student. And then finally, the second one is behavior specialists. We've been bringing behavioral specialists in for those students that really require more one-on-one, more frequent types of interventions. And those behavior specialists will sometimes proactively, preventatively know times of day and utilize all the materials and spaces that we've spoken about throughout the day, the evening rather, to approach and support those students and teachers the best they can. And now we have Lauren here who is going to share a specific school-wide approach to the multi-tiered system.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Sepulveda, and I am the proud assistant principal of John S. Martinez Sea and Sky STEM Magnet School. I want to begin by starting with some of our outcomes, moving a little bit backwards, because we are a sales school, and I'm very proud of these outcomes. We have 0 suspensions, 0 expulsions. We did have 3 office referral incidents this year, but they were handled with parent support brought in. Speaking to teaching and learning, our grade 7 students, 45% of them in SBA last year reached proficiency or above in ELA. In grade 8, 36% of our students reached proficiency and above in ELA. Grade 8, 38% proficiency and above in science. Grade 5, 24% proficiency and above in math. And right now, our absenteeism rate is 6.5%. Our students are coming to our school. They're wanting to learn. They're not okay with being okay, and neither are we. We always want to give them that growth mindset, but that needs to be modeled. We can't assume that our students are coming to us with everything that we need them to know. That's what we're in the business of. So we explicitly teach every part of what we want our classrooms to look like, what we want our cafeteria to look like, what we want our hallways to look like. And we do that through our SOAR matrix. We believe in safety, ownership, attitude, and respect at John Martinez. And we make sure that we break this down for students. We do this on a school-wide level, in addition to morning announcements where we have students identify an adult they can go to if they ever need to ask for help. We know that if students' basic needs are not met, they're not going to be invested in teaching and learning. So therefore, we have a care closet located in our clinic where students can get any of the basic needs they need from deodorant to shampoo. We have an active PTO. We have an active SPMT, and we do this all under the guise of fidelity to our systems. We prioritize our relationships, we make time for our students, and we involve our parents in. When it comes time to small groups, student voice and choice, our students are able to choose their specials. We give them voice through a very active student council that we have, and we provide opportunities from them top-down modeled. I even take our students on a 3-day leadership retreat each year to model the different opportunities that are available for them. And then finally, we look at Decision Ed. We look at Review 360 to make individual decisions for students, but we also help students take ownership over their action and work with an adult to see how they can resolve any harm done to the school community. When it comes to these preventative measures not working, there are some times where we do need other disciplinary approaches. So preventative measures is, of course, the majority of what we do, but we also utilize town meetings where we come to the table together as a grade level with parents present so that the message from the parents is the same message that we are giving consistency to our students. We do have a refocus room where if students need time away from the classroom, they have it, but it's always with the goal to bring our kids back into the classroom. We don't want our students outside of the community. We want to involve them in the work we do in their classrooms. We do utilize student peer mediation. We have parent meetings. We have natural consequences. If a student rips down a bulletin board, that student is going to be the one repairing that bulletin board. We have mentorship opportunities. For instance, we are data driven. We have come up with a program called Breakfast with the Bigs, where we looked at Review 360 and Decision Ed, and we decided what littles, our K2 students, need more support. And we looked within our own learning community for our students to be mentors. We even brought down the data to the day our students are seeing we see the most absences in our students. So Wednesday is the day we chose to roll out this initiative, where in the morning, our K2 students are meeting with our 7 and 8 student council students to have breakfast together, build those relationships. And our kids are so excited to meet with our older students. Not only that, when they're there, we make sure that they take part in cell activities together and they work on attendance activities. So nothing is ever done without purpose or without reason. We believe this because we're growing our students for more than just compliance in the classroom. We're growing them to be productive members of society. So we believe full-heartedly in social emotional learning, and we know that this full system in place is the reason that it's working at John Martinez. So now I'm going to pass the microphone to Bill for next steps.
Thank you. I promise these are the last couple. So thank you again to John for pulling some of that data. I think that when we take a step back and take a look at some of the things that he had up on the screen earlier, it tells a pretty promising story. So if we take a look at the month of September last year versus the month of September this year, and we talk about out of school suspensions, we're down 14%. When we couple in-school suspensions with out of school suspension, September to September of this year, we're down 26%. If you take a look up on the screen now, taking a look at some of this data that we are able to pull from Review 360, all levels of behavioral incidents, we're down 33%. This is a testament to a number of different things. It's certainly the 700 circles that Nikisha referenced before. It's certainly the things that we have going on over at John S. Martinez. It's reliance on data like you see up on the screen. It's myriad factors, but the question then becomes, so what comes next? We've identified 3 buckets that we are working towards now. First and foremost, we find it critically important to engage with our families. We need to ensure that we are engaging with them as we provide care coordination moving forward. We also want to leverage some of the collaboration and communication methods that are already happening in our phenomenal schools. Secondly, we need to solicit student voice. We're going to do that with the creation of student focus groups, the creation of a student ambassador role, and then also utilizing student SEL reflections. Lastly, we need to scale up some of our practices, most notably utilizing behavioral data to inform professional development. I think that if we can engage families, we can solicit that student voice, and we can scale up some of these best practices, we'll see only better results moving forward. We will also be able to stay true to what Dr. James Comer said many years ago. That's now on the screen. No significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions? Mr. Goldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to congratulate the superintendent and her staff on again putting out a good presentation, giving us very important information. Data is important to understand what's happening. Collecting data, being able to disseminate it to us in a understandable manner for some of us who are a little slower, is highly appreciated by me. I just want to make a couple of quick comments. I don't have the presentation in front of me because I didn't get a chance to go home before I came to the meeting. But the 2 slides that stood out to me was the slide with the schools showing how they went up and down before and after COVID. And the thing that really stood out to me was the Bridgeport numbers. They look like they went down, and I'm wondering I don't have it in front of me, so I can't.
We can pull that back up, Mr. Golson, and then ask Mr. Wayne to address it.
I'm wondering if they're doing something differently than we're doing in terms of what's going on there. Thank you. Why why they're so successful. And the second slide that stood out to me was the slide about the discipline levels by grade. And there it is again, the ninth grade standing out as an issue, along with the 10th grade. And I'm wondering, when I was in school here, way back when, we had K through 6, 7 and 8, and then high school. And I'm wondering if this might call for some sort of, but I remember other school systems had the ninth graders actually the 7th, 8th, and 9th graders were together. And I'm wondering if there is we may need to look in the future about maybe restructuring to give those 9th graders a little more time before they raise up into the high school level. So and my last comments, and I have a lot of comments, but my last comment is on John Martinez. I knew John well. We worked together very closely at the Community Action Agency. He was the CEO and I was a COO there. We worked closely together. I worked with him up at the state capitol, and this man would be all grins right now. Saw what was happening at that school and how that community is coming together. And I'm very proud of that. And I hope that we're able to replicate that in other schools in the system. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you.
Oh, and by the way,
Yes.
I still have a plant that he gave me and my wife when we had our daughter 21 years ago. I still have that. I call it the John Martinez plant. I've actually grown it. It's all over the house now. So I wish he was here to see it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm lucky to have a plant last 21 days, let alone 21 years. But Dr. Joyner.
Okay, I just want to reinforce some of the things that have been done tonight, and I'm glad to see that people have mentioned Dr. Comer, who's a child psychiatrist, which means he's also a medical doctor, and that it looks like, at least at Martinez, we're using a medical model, and we're using action research. No research without action, no action without research, and ongoing data. As far as differences between the cities of Bridgeport, New Haven, whatever, one of the issues in statistics is group equivalency. So unless you know that you're comparing equivalent groups, then you can only learn something about what impact your initiatives are having on your students. And the other part is that you have to make sure that we're not doing what, I don't think we're doing that, but in some places you don't want to do what happened in Atlanta, where a person that I knew well, Beverly Hall, was put in jail for falsifying data. And yeah, and I knew Beverly. In fact, they owed me money when she left Newark, but we got to do that. But this is so good, and you should know that Mr. Winter is sort of like the Lone Ranger. He doesn't have a big staff of people that can help him do all this stuff. So it is work above and beyond the call of duty that he has been able to give us high quality information, and I have confidence that it's accurate and real data. The thing I love about New Haven that I see in schools that I go is that if they're not doing the one thing they are doing is they're trying to implement what Dr. Comer said and his colleagues about relationships. And I sum it up by saying that teaching is reaching. And it's not just explicit teaching of academics, but explicit teaching of expected behaviors. You can't assume that the modern youngster is getting everything that he or she has at home around how to behave in school. And so the other good thing that Martinez is doing, they have a great principal, by the way, and a great AP. I think she was Teacher of the Year, and comes from a great family. The Sepulveda School, Hill House graduates, by the way, Darnell. I just thought I'd put that in there. But the idea that kids don't know, they don't care what you know until they know how much you care. And I saw that at Clemente. I see that at my grandchildren's school. And my grandson is in high school. I see that. And one of my granddaughters, they're in 3 separate schools. And I see it in all 3 of those schools. And that is different from the don't smile until Christmas adage that a lot of teachers that came out during the 60s were told. And that's really important. I think the other piece is that the family engagement. If we can get parents on the same page in terms of what they expect from their own children as what teachers expect when they get to school, and if they're checking for homework, if they're talking to them every day about what went well, what didn't, and they're communicating with, and they're sending their children to school, then we can really, really rock this thing. And I'm glad to see that they're doing that. But it's not just what teachers do or administrators do, it's also what parents working in concert with teachers do. And Dr. Comer was the first and foremost advocate for this major role of parents, that parents should be involved at home with their kids. They should be involved as volunteers in the school, and they should be involved on school councils. And I guess the last thing that I want to say is that we have to figure out a way to institutionalize this across all schools. We can't expect the same results at one school that we do at another, but we can expect progress. Because quite frankly, depending on where you are in the city, you may deal with a lot more than you would if you were someplace else. A good example is that Troop has an excellent principal who is a product of our school district, but he deals with challenges that are very different than the challenges that one faces in other parts of the city. And so that's really, really, really important. And then when we look at our whole system and compare it to some of the places we're compared to, I think Matt said it best when he talked about the differentiation in resources across the state, as well as what kids go home to. And that's critically important. But we have a good system. We have a good superintendent. We have great staff. We're up against it because of resources, because of man and woman power and whatever power that humans bring to the table. But we keep trying, we keep moving forward, and we keep trying to solve problems. What I like so much about this is that instead of us presenting problems, we're trying to solve them. And we need to keep that up. That needs to be a staple in our district. And I certainly appreciate everybody that presented tonight. I would say keep on keeping on, as my grandmother used to say. And I appreciate the leadership, and I appreciate the board in trying to understand what our folk are against, and the leadership of the mayor who has his child in a public school. That's probably, if you looked across the country at mayors, I don't know how many mayors would put their child in a low-income urban school, particularly at a young age. So I think we're putting our money where our mouths are. So thanks a lot, and may the force continue to be with us.
All right. I'll just jump in here real quick, and then want to say thanks to each of you for the presentation. I really appreciated hearing all of your words, and I'm thankful to Ms. Jackson and the superintendent to make sure we're hearing from a wide variety of voices from the people that are doing the work. I think that's always very important. Really enjoyed it. Loved also hearing the case study of Martinez as something that bolsters the case that a lot of this stuff does work, and it does lead to better outcomes in the schools and reduction in behavioral issues and kids learning. And I'm assuming happier teachers and paras and other school staff as well. So I do appreciate that. I will be asking after the second marking period that we have another presentation related to disciplinary data. I'm also going to be asking that at that point we see it listed by the data by school, so that we can also kind of see and have those conversations about where things are in the different districts, different parts of the district. And I would also appreciate it if that data also had, if there was any arrest data. Unfortunately, occasionally, police are called into the buildings, so I do think we need to take a look at that. And then I definitely would also like to see some restorative practice data, because our code of conduct does require and encourage that. And so I'd be very interested to see how that's happening. And I'd also like to see that by school, understanding that we do not have enough staff to meet the needs for this, just like we don't have enough staff in a variety of areas. If I remember correctly from our staffing guidelines report, and the gap of what we need based on standards and what we have funding for, there's, I want to say there was close to 24 people connected to this work, restorative practices, in-school suspension folks, because it's better to keep a kid when you can in school, so there's an opportunity for staff to work with them and opportunity for them to learn. So I do think that that's important to look at that data so that we can continue to have that and continue to ground it in that code of conduct, which unanimously passed by the board, worked on by administrators, teachers, parents, and other advocates, to build that in there while keeping all the necessary parts for other parts of the disciplinary, the full toolbox that's needed in any school. So it's not that, kids can't be suspended. It's how are they going to come back into the building once they're suspended? Because you might head off the next fight if you have kids dealing with the implications of the last fight. So I do appreciate that, and thank you for all of that. And yeah, I think that's all I had for my notes there. So thank you. Anybody else on this item? Mr. Goldson?
The mayor hasn't had
All right,
a chance
Mr.
yet, so I'll go.
Mayor Elicker.
Thanks for the presentation. I just had and appreciate, last year we had some data on a breakdown of disciplines by school, and that was interesting. So I think it's always helpful to see comparisons with years past. So appreciate that as a part of this. I can't make sense of the Waterbury numbers, and I guess they have fewer students than we do. I would have to imagine that some of this is about discipline policies as well, and us having a policy where we're less likely to discipline students in certain scenarios or suspend students. And I just wondered if you could, and I don't know if you talked to your colleagues in other districts, but if you could shed some light on why these numbers are so different.
Talk to our colleagues. For Bridgeport, that we know that they have a deep family engagement component that they've been instituting over the last couple of years. And we think that is potentially impacting. It's probably a lot more complex than that. Our colleagues in Waterbury are looking at their strategic plan around this work. And again, the complexities of different cultures and values around students being suspended, students being excluded, may not be in total alignment with our values in New Haven.
Very diplomatic.
Mr. Goldson.
Thank you. That was a diplomatic answer. Thank you for that. Actually, Mr. Wilcox and the mayor both touched on points that I wanted to raise, even though this information is very helpful and positive in a way. I'm still concerned. We did have those numbers last year, and one of the things that concerned me was the fact that only about half of our school has in-school suspension. And I still don't understand why some do and why some don't, particularly since we have a goal, or we have said over and over again, we'd like to see less students put out of school because empty chair doesn't get educated, doesn't get taught. So I'm hoping that eventually you guys could come to us and tell us that you're going to be implementing more in-school suspensions. The other thing that I'm concerned about is, again, I looked at these Waterbury numbers, and my guess was it was more that they didn't have the same kind of mindset that we have towards dealing with what could be considered disciplinary issues, right? Like if a young man is wearing a hat, he gets disciplined for that. Maybe in Waterbury, they make him leave. Maybe in New Haven, we figure out another way to deal with it. But my biggest concern is that, and I like to see as Mr. Wilcox suggested, another report on discipline. And I like to see it broken down by schools and so on, but I also like to see it broken down by race and by gender. Because my guess is that we're still going to have the same issues with brown and black students that we were having in these reports, in these data reports. And that is that there may not be as much patience for dealing with those issues by our staff than we would want. You know, it's just implicit sometimes that people just see different people different ways. We read stories every day in a newspaper about a young man being suspended because or not being able to walk with his class because of his hairstyle, you know, or young ladies, you know, because they have colored braids as opposed to whatever, you know. And I like to see a breakdown of schools, the races, and the reasoning why these young people are being put out of school. And I certainly would like to see a report on in school versus out of school, and those schools that don't have in school, why they don't have.
So, Mr. Golson, we agree with everything that you're saying, and even some of those data points that you mentioned, those are things that we're also interested in making sure that we're looking at as well. Even as we're looking at, even as Dr. Negron talks about how we look through things through an equity lens, again, even as we're looking through the discipline data and what's our response to that. So absolutely.
And we have seen that different staff have different relationships with different kind of students, right? Like when Kermit was at Hill House, you know, those young men there loved him, you know, and they worshiped him. And I bet you that the issues were reduced, the disciplinary issues were reduced there when he was principal. I don't know if I'm not saying that current principal doesn't have the same kind of concerns about the students, but you know, some staff deal with our those populations differently. I mean, even the state has acknowledged that it's an important issue we should be dealing with. They just approved a school that would be focused on young men, particularly young brown and black men, and how to help them navigate the system. So I really hope that we move on.
No, absolutely. I just wanted to also we have community partners from Yale Child Development Center. I just would be remiss if I didn't mention Sheila Brantley and Dr. Christine Emmons, who are here today with us as well, and a few other folks who are supporting. So hi, hi, Dr. Emmons, how are you? Are there any other questions? I don't know if that.
I had my hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Dr. Joyner?
Yeah, I just want to go back to this without naming names, and make some general comments about why you have differences in issues like suspensions. First of all, and I think it would probably take a study, but I would also caution you against looking at social science statistics the way you look at physical, biological statistics, because there are a lot of more room for error in the social sciences. But if you look at the kind of teacher that wants to work in New Haven, that's a factor. If you look at the type of person who wants to be an administrator in New Haven, that's a factor. And the reason I say that is because I really believe that New Haven is a cultural capital of the state when it comes to sensitivity, tolerance, and the ability to mediate between competing views of what things should be like. And I think about the teachers that I entered the system with, people like Jack Gillette, Terry Freeman, and others. They had more progressive views on race, class, gender, sexual orientation. And we still have a lot of pockets in Connecticut that are very conservative. And they don't look at the world the way we look at it. And the leadership in our community is open and supportive of that, and more forgiving of things like wearing your hat. In fact, I used to always say I'm more interested in what's in the kid's head rather than what kind of hat he's wearing, because that's a social custom. But we were able to convince most of the kids at Halls that it's probably a good idea not to do it. But now, at the same time, kids were wearing their hats in college classes. So, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense, but people saw that as a distraction. So I think the differences between the four major cities is that they're not equivalent in terms of factors outside of schools and inside of school that would be more, I won't even say lenient, more understanding of behavior. The fact that Dr. Comer was here, the fact that Ed Ziegler was here, the fact that Ed Gordon was here, the fact that Yale University is here, the fact that the president of Yale University was the first expert on emotional intelligence. And you have to also understand that historically New Haven has been a mecca for innovation and cutting edge opportunities in education. The father of Head Start, Ed Ziegler, the guru of emotional intelligence, President Salovey from Yale, James Comer, who was a pioneer in school reform, as well as people like Christine Emmons, who's in the audience and who understands research probably better than anybody I know, and understands how to get at it and try to find the truth. And Lynn Brantley, who's a clinical professional who understands education as well as anyone. So I think that's it, and we should be grateful for that. But at the same time, we still have a challenged population of students. We have the most refugees, and there's a difference between an immigrant and a refugee. You can be a refugee and an immigrant, but you can be an immigrant without being a refugee. So you have these children coming from war-torn countries. You have people in the city who are anxious about the fact that they're not documented. All of that impacts a person's learning, and the fact that our system tries to understand the emotions inherent in all of that is a credit to us. I just wonder what would happen if we had all the resources that we needed in order to get this work done. What Matt constantly says, what Donnell and the mayor constantly says. So thanks a lot. I hope that explanation was helpful.
All right, thank you. Dr. Negron, is that the end of your
That
update?
completes my report.
Thank you.
Here, everybody again.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna buzz through these last items because I think I'm stuck with all of them, but a lot of it is just announcements because they're for meetings that haven't occurred yet. So just as a president's report, board president's not here, but I'll just mention that there is a board retreat scheduled for next Monday, the 16th, 5:30 PM at 54 Meadow. You might notice that that's typically when we're having the Finance and Operations Committee meeting. So that Finance and Operations Committee meeting, which typically starts at 4:30, is instead going to move to 4 PM as a start. And we're optimistically thinking that we'll be able to get done with our items before the board retreat. And if not, we'll deal with that then. But so that's just two announcements there. As far as a Head Start report, we meet on Thursday, the 19th at 5 PM. So no report. Citywide School Building Committee, we meet this Thursday at 4:30 PM. So no report. Finance and Operations, just want to mention that in addition to having information about our annual not to exceed change order reports and the legal contract expenditure reports, and working on policies, we did get an update on the electric bus grant that Mr. Lamb reported that the federal government announced the release of the rebate program for January 2024. Updates are going to be provided at future meetings, and my understanding is that there's a group made up of school personnel, city personnel, first student personnel, and some community folks, including some folks that have testified in public comment that have met before and are going to meet again on pursuing the possibilities of us applying. So let's pause here. Is there any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I am getting a little jittery that we haven't put out the bus contract yet. So I hope that we see soon a schedule for when that's going to occur. I know Branford just put theirs out this beginning of this month. They're a much smaller district. We probably need a little more time. Get responses, so I hope that we do it soon.
All right, well, we'll have an update at either the next F and O or the following one on this timeline and schedule for that. Agree, we do need to work on that. So finally, governance report, Dr. Benitez is not here. I assume they're doing great work. And I assume we're going to have policies to vote on at our next meeting. And finally, the food service task group report. We meet tomorrow at 4:30, I think. Trying to remember. It's posted online with the agenda. And is there a motion?
I move that we adjourn, Mr. President, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. It's non-discussable. Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker, Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Au revoir.